Hey, Austin homeowners, welcome to our June 2025 real estate market update. In this video, I'm going to cover the most recent real estate statistics and then talk about some of the most interesting things that I've seen in the real estate market over the last month. Let's get into the stats. So looking at the inventory for Austin and the entire MLS, you really see that the active listings has skyrocketed earlier in the year. And we've seen typically see a peak in the market later in the summer. So let's hope we're flatline from here and don't continue to go up, because that would not be positive for pricing pressure going into later in the year and probably next year as well. Looking at what the stats were in May of 2025, there were 3,046 sales, which was down about 5.5%. Average dollars per square foot was down about $10 a square foot. Median price is at $441, and average sales price was just about $585,000, with median days on the market being 31 days. Looking at the number of new listings this year, this is why that inventory has increased. We've seen new listings increase 6.4%, and the number of homes going under contract down about 3%, and the original list price to closed price is down to 94.1%. If you're planning on putting your home on the market anytime in the near future, be sure to sign up for our next in-person home selling seminar, perhaps one of our upcoming webinars. Go to kopaseminar.com to sign up. Some of the information I'm going to talk about might seem negative, but I want to make clear to you that as I'm shooting this video, I have 9 homes that are under contract. So we are selling homes, including 3 homes that we put under contract last week. So don't take any information that I'm saying to be overly negative, just that one of the reasons why we're able to be successful in getting our clients' homes sold is giving them real world information about what's actually happening in the market so they can be successful, and not just burying my head in the sand and pretending like things aren't happening. Now I wanted to talk about some of the interesting things that I've seen over the last month. A couple months ago, I told Joyce, my wife and also business partner, that it seemed like some of the market conditions and also some of the sentiment of the people that were contacting me about selling their home were eerily similar to 2022. And one of those things was a lot of people being a little bit more overconfident than I would be about, well, I'm just going to rent my house and the market will be a whole lot better next year. And I wanted to talk about that because the data doesn't support that at this point. Nobody hopes that prices will be higher next year more than I do, and interest rates will be lower next year as well. But there isn't really a whole lot of data that supports that. And to tell you that, it's hard for me to tell anybody not to put their home on the market right now because of that data. And I'm not willing to take on the market risk for next year, because certainly in the financial markets, there's a lot of possible headwinds that could cause some problems, both in the real estate market and perhaps the other financial markets as well. But I just got this text from somebody who is going to sell their house, and now they're wanting to consider renting and selling their home, which is totally fine with me. But I wanted to point out that, here's the situation in 2022. I wasn't involved with any of this, but just was tracking it because it's near my house and near where we sell a lot of homes. But this is a person that had their house on the market at $695,000 back in 2022. They decided to rent the house. It was an owner-occupied property, so they're stuck with this. They've got to sell the house before their 2 and 5 capital gains exclusion runs out. And so this is what I've been warning everybody about, is that we were going to have this higher number of homes on the market because all these people who decided to rent the house were going to have to sell the house. Probably shouldn't have listed the home at $695 back then, but they could have sold it for $650. Well, fast forward 3 years later, they're running out of that exclusion time period. They've got to put it on the market, and they just sold it for only $535 minus paying $8,000 in closing costs for the buyer. And so that really goes to show you that, just assuming that the market's going to be better next year or maybe 2 years from now, looking into a crystal ball, it's hard to say what's going to happen, but I wouldn't necessarily be so overconfident about it. A couple things to think about. When people ask me whether they should rent the house or sell the house, I haven't really found that a lot of people take any advice that I give them anyway. They usually just decide to do what your friends want to tell you to do. The question that I would ask your friend, if they're trying to give you advice about this, is ask them what the plan is for depreciation recapture. And they'll probably tell you, what does that mean, right? They'll probably say, what does that mean? And if they tell you, what does that mean? Don't listen to them about any advice about real estate investing, because they're just giving you this emotional response that you should keep the property a little bit, definitely be better, but they don't actually necessarily know what they're talking about. And so that'd be something that I would be careful about. Again, The only thing I really can talk to people about is the tax consequences of keeping the property. And there really are some consequences of keeping a property that you've had as an owner-occupied property and that you've turned into or are planning to turn into a rental property. You've got the 2 and 5 exclusion. You're going to lose your homestead exemption. Right. And so these are big deals in terms of future appreciation for the property and what you would actually put into your pocket. Because remember, it's not what you make, it's what you actually keep and put into your pocket at the end of the day. Second thing is I tend to work with a lot of older folks about selling the property. Understandably, sometimes they want to keep the property because they want to be able to pass it down to the next generation, and they're misunderstanding some of the ways that the taxes work nowadays, right? Because you can sell your house, and in most cases around here, many cases around here at least, check with your financial advisor or CPA, right? But they would be able to sell it without paying any capital gains taxes. They're thinking that they have to keep the property until they die and then leave it to their kids, right? But, if you think about it, if it's a property, let's say in Cedar Park, and they're keeping the property, but then they're moving to Michigan, well, now what's going to happen? Now the daughter who's living up in Michigan, needs to figure out a way to sell the property down here in Cedar Park and all these kind of things. And the daughter really doesn't want just a run-of-the-mill home in Cedar Park. If you're talking about the lake house that the family's always gone to or things like that, probably makes more sense to sell the house, have the money. You would also get the step-up basis upon death from the stock accounts that you would have. So in the end of the day, you really want to think about all of these issues, and those are some things that I can help you in terms of working through. Well, does this make sense? Does that not make sense? So at least you're making your decisions based on real information. Another interesting thing that I've seen this month is that I've had several people contact me about their home that didn't sell. And in fact, as of about an hour ago from me shooting this, we just closed on a property that had been previously listed with another agent, and we were able to get it sold. So I get a lot of people contacting me after they've been frustrated, and I always ask them how they came up with their list price. It's interesting for me to hear that. And in many cases, it's because they've used average dollars per square foot for the property, right? But that may be a good way to gauge the overall market, and it's certainly something to look at. But you have to remember that average dollars per square foot takes into consideration homes that are selling for above that average and homes that may be selling below that average. But here's how buyers look at it. Real estate is a comparison business, and so buyers are looking at one home and they're comparing it to what they could get for another property. And before you just price your house based on dollars per square foot, it's really important to take a look at what other homes are out there, what else could a buyer buy, and take off your seller hat and put on your buyer hat and have a realistic idea of what's going on in the market. Otherwise, what happens in these situations is two things. One is it's just very frustrating. I see people have their home on the market for like $100,000 over asking price, which is over 10% over asking price, with zero chance of the home selling. And they're very frustrated. And so then what happens is they're contacting their agent and they're, what kind of feedback have we gotten? What kind of feedback? And understandably so. But then they get feedback from their agent about what's going on, and they'll tell them things like, well, you really need to replace the flooring or something like that. And so I went into one house and they were talking about replacing the flooring. The flooring is an issue. The buyer of the house is going to replace the flooring throughout the downstairs of the property. But there's also like 6 or 7 other issues with the property. So that's not going to overcome the fact that the home is $100,000 overpriced. Like, you're not going to sell your house for an extra $100,000 because you installed $7,000 of flooring. It's just not going to work. And, in reality, a lot of agents are just unwilling to have these conversations with people about it because they're either afraid they're going to get fired or not hired in the first place. And it causes a lot of frustration for the buyer. So pricing a home is something that I study every day. And it's not just saying, oh, the house is overpriced or whatever the case is, but how did you come up with that price? Is it going to be the same way that the buyers are going to be looking at that price as well? And that doesn't mean that's the whole story. We sell tons of homes for people where the buyers are complaining that the price is too high. So I'm not afraid of that. But you do get into these situations where it's just like you look at this house and then you look at this home over here that's for sale and nobody's going to buy this house because it's just not in the same category as the other homes that are for sale. And finally, just talking again about seeing homes coming back on the market. So I'm going to be putting a home on the market next week. And the clients had actually moved out of town, but we did recommend several make-ready things to get their home ready. It's never my goal to get anybody to spend money on things on their house just to spend money, right? We don't want to spend $5,000 to increase the sales price $4,000. That doesn't make any sense, right? But there are important things that we know buyers are looking for about the property. And I just saw 2 homes that are within about a quarter mile of the home that we're selling, where those sellers did not do those things. And in both cases, the homes went under contract and are now back off the market while they are either making those repairs, or in one case, totally off the market. The seller got frustrated, right? And so my goal is to always be telling our clients, give you the benefit of the 10,000 hours that I've spent selling homes and all of the home buyers that I see coming into our open houses and contacting me, and giving you an idea of how buyers are going to see things about your home to prevent that from happening to you. The way I look at it is, it's like any kind of technology. If I buy something and then it doesn't work and I call the support line and they tell me, oh yeah, that was a known defect, I want to give you the benefit of knowing about those known defects before we put your house on the market. Because what happens otherwise is your home goes on the market, we get a buyer, right? And everybody doesn't realize that the real skill of a real estate broker is taking you from contract to the closing table. Almost anybody can get the house under contract. The skill is, how do you get it from contract to the closing table? And that's what we really excel at. So if you got a property that you want to put on the market, let's talk about what possibly you can do as almost just self-defense to get you to that closing table. As always, thank you so much for watching. We appreciate your support and make it a great day.